Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Super excited for this episode. This guest joined me when we first started the company. That was episode 42, where we were joined by Deborah Borg. She's back again, this time Chief HR and Communications Officer at Bunge. Welcome to the show again, Deborah. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me back.
It's nice to see you again. I can't believe it's been 3 years.
Oh my gosh, I know. And your company's grown so much in 3 years. It's amazing.
You too.
True.
First and foremost, how are you? How have things been?
I'm good. I think like everyone, just kind of settling into what the new normal currently is, but happy and healthy. And I feel like I get out of bed every day with a purpose, which is great. So I'm refocused. I'm learning to get refocused on the little things in life.
Yeah, the things that matter, right?
The things that matter. Yeah, exactly.
That's definitely one thing I've taken away from this is really the attitude of gratitude.
Absolutely.
Focusing on what things that are around me, the health and wealth of my family, and all of the positives, because otherwise we can kind of get consumed by everything else out there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's super important.
Yeah.
Super important. And some of the little things that you didn't even notice before, like how wonderful it is to be able to go out for a walk in let's say the fresh air in New York City, but to just be outdoors and be able to go for a walk and, and before that used to be a little bit more just a means to an end. And now it is the end, right? That is the activity for the day. So it's appreciating some of those things a little bit more. So
who would have thought we'd ever think that I'm so excited to get out today, just for a walk, right?
I know. Our perspective's completely changed in the last 6 months. That's right.
Yeah. I do really miss one of the big takeaways for me was just spending that quality time with my daughter, because I got to
absolutely.
She was at home from nursery and had at least a half an hour. Normally end up being an hour walk together every single day. And one-on-one quality time was super impactful on me. I just realized these little quirky habits that she has and these little things she does.
What a gift to be able to spend that time with her, right? Again, nothing that you would have planned to do, but what a gift to be able to have so much time with her.
Yeah. And it didn't even need to be anything planned, just actually being together and being present.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'd get home from work, I'll be honest, a lot of time, and I'm sure everyone can relate, where you're sometimes you're there, but you're not fully engaged.
Yep.
And it's not because you don't want to be, you're just kind of your mind thinking about work and everything that's going on and what's my diary look like tomorrow, and there's a million things, but just being able to take an hour a day and just walk away from the house to the office and just get outside and just forget about it. Something like making more of a habit. In fact, we've actually cut down the number of days that she's at nursery so we can spend more time together. So
that's awesome. How old is she now, Chris?
She's 2.
Oh my gosh.
Now. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So when we first spoke, I didn't even know I was going to be a dad at that point.
No. And then I think the last time we interacted, she was pretty new at that point. I think you were a brand new dad. So
exactly.
Wow.
Still learning. How's it in New York? It's pretty empty still. Is it still?
It is. Yeah. I mean, the city's certainly a shell of itself, but it's slowly coming back to life. There's outdoor, everything outdoor is open. Now they've just reopened. So you can eat dinner outdoors. You can't go inside anywhere. But they've just reopened now things like the zoo and the botanical gardens that you can you can register to be able to go at a certain time slot. So you see slow signs of reopening. It seems like Broadway won't open until January. They're saying January 6th is the earliest now. So they keep pushing that date out. That's kind of been the barometer, I think, for New York, that when they close down all of these big indoor stadiums, and for us, the theatre district is, such an important part of the city.
Big draw, right? Yeah,
it's a huge draw. Yeah. Now they're saying that they're anticipating over the winter months that they're not going to open indoor dining, which is going to make the city kind of shut down again, I think, in the winter.
Yeah, because we're not going to eat outside in the freezing cold.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they're still being really cautious about trying to avoid crowding and too many people in public spaces. New Yorkers have been extremely vigilant around wearing masks and staying away from one another and socially distancing more than I would have anticipated, because it's a city that's always very crowded. But it was so impacted so early on in this pandemic that and still is. I mean, there's still a lot going on in the city from that perspective. So, the citizens of the city have been really, really respectful, I would say.
Good.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the wintertime. I'm not excited for yet another complete shutdown. But
yeah, and you've been open the whole time, though, right? As a business, obviously you're team ahead, right?
Yeah, which is it. Yeah, we have. We've been fully open. We've got just shy of 30,000 employees around the world, and about 15,000 of them are in factories or facilities. So they're working at a port or a production facility, and that's all stayed open. And that's been an interesting set of challenges to work through. It's been really uplifting in many respects because we were designated an essential industry from the beginning. So providing food and working with, we work with farmers and get food from where it's grown to where it's needed and process the food along the way, essentially. And so, we really latched on the communication side of the house, really latched onto this essential nature and the pride that creates in employees. And then we had about the other 10,000 employees working from home radically overnight, really. It kind of started, as we all know, in Asia, and we learned a few lessons from what had happened in China.
Do you already get a heads up then? Like, were you ahead of the game? Because like most companies were ahead of their own government in the US and in the UK that had a global presence.
Yeah, we had seen it unfold in China, and that the local team on the ground there did a lot to manage, but it really wasn't. It was a distant thought that it would. I don't know that anybody was really anticipating that it would go anywhere else, So we had learnt some lessons of what they did very well, and it kind of got sprung on them. And so they had put in place a few very quick, rapid protocols around communications, around sending people home, around getting IT equipment where it needed to be. And then it kind of unfolded as it unfolded in different parts of the world in different stages. The US was probably one of the next, well, actually Europe was next, and then the US. And by then we were kind of in a rhythm. By the time it hit South America, which was, the last of our regions to be impacted. And right now we've got all of our office workers still working from home at least part of the time. So we've got a lot of our offices back. In fact, China's back full time, which is the irony of the whole thing.
I know in most companies I'm speaking to, it's the same irony.
It's like, no, we're back to normal. Yeah, exactly. So they're even traveling domestically and all of that. But the rest of our employees are still partially working from home. So we've gone back to working in or rotating in shifts in many parts of the world, in Europe and in the US. In South America, there's not really a line of sight as to when we'll come back in any capacity. But it's been a bit of an interesting dynamic for our workforce to, on one hand, it's stay home, and on the other hand, it's you have to come to work. And so it's created a lot of just daily issues of anxiety and why do I have to work, and making sure that you keep people safe, and the over communication and the over amount of protocols to be able to keep people safe in the factories, both from an emotional well-being perspective, which was probably we felt good about the physical safety that we could create, and the protocols that we could create. It was really the sense of psychological security or emotional safety. I mean, people are seeing all of this stuff unfold in the media, and now they've come across friends and friends of friends that have contracted the COVID, and that just creates a really, really scary space for a lot of people around I don't feel safe, I don't want to go outside the house. You office workers don't have to go outside the house, so it's been an interesting dynamic to manage for sure for many, many companies, but we are really fortunate from a business perspective. It's going to be one of the best years that we've had from a business perspective in my 5 years with the company, interestingly enough.
Puts you in quite a tough spot though, right? Because given the fact that you have a global role and the rules, regulations, and the way it unfolds is changing every day all over the world. How are you managing that with a team from a comms perspective? Because some employees are like, well, how comes they're going back to work, or how comes they're from home? And it's like this really, do you have just separate communication channels for separate regions, or how do you manage that? Because it's kind of ever evolving, ever changing, right? It's very unique.
Yeah, it is, and that continues to ever evolve and ever change, actually. But we started fairly early on with establishing a crisis committee in every part of the world. And the big part of this was the global committee that was going to set principles, where we were going to get our source of information from, How are we going to spell out what happened at different stages, what the company was going to accept or do at different stages, both from a safety protocol, the expectation of being in the office or not being in the office, etc. And then the local committees in every country really were empowered to take those principles and do with them what made sense based on the same information that they would see. And there were a few things that we governed and said, we don't want you to govern this locally. But it was unfolding so quickly, and the government situations and directives were very different in different parts of the world. In fact, we took a lot of our cues from the Singapore government. It was one of the first impacted areas, and the government was so decisive, and you can argue whether they were decisive in the right direction or not, but just being decisive in a time of crisis is so important. We decided was, again, pretty early on, these are the decisions that have to escalate up. This is what we want you to be measuring and tracking and reporting back to us centrally. These are the things that are non-negotiable. This is where we get our source of information from. Now, with that, go and do what makes sense on the ground. We had put in place a couple of communication protocols around, what are we going to tell customers? So immediately it was, are we going to disrupt supply for our customers? So we put in place a set of standards. This is what we can say today. And how do we get those shared around the world so that people are using the same consistent message? There was a lot of rhetoric at the beginning when it was just in China to, is China going to be impacted from a supply perspective? Are you seeing any supply disruptions into China? A lot of what we do is bring and trade products into different parts of the world, China being a big customer of ours. So we had developed these standards and communication protocols, both around for our employees as well as our constituents, our external constituents, customers, shareholders to some extent, mostly the board. And that was helpful. A lot of them got modified, right? Like, this is the situation right now, and we're going to take this frame and we're going to modify it. And you cannot have a command and control kind of approach.
Great point. It's impossible to...
Yeah. So we were really comfortable with, look, we've got the right people on the ground that see what's happening. We need to empower them to be able to make decisions. Where things would start to get cloudy is when you have a lot of people that would want to weigh in on, now's the time to bring people back, and we can start bringing people back into the office. And so we've been really deliberate about, there are only two voices that are going to make that decision, or this committee that we had put in place. They're the voices that make that decision. If you've got input, share it with them. Decisions made in a room. We were meeting daily, and in some parts of the world, they're still meeting daily. Right at the beginning, we're now on a weekly cadence of meeting. And now we're at the stage of, what do we need to turn into permanent realities for the organization? So we did instill a number of what we felt were really important things. That crisis committee was one. We instilled weekly calls with our senior leadership team where we could give them real-time updates. We could hear real-time what was going on the ground in the parts of the world they were in. It was really helpful for our teams in South America, for example, to hear what was happening in China. The fact that this had passed already, and these were the protocols that the government there had put in place, and now we've got everybody back to work. I think some degree of comfort that this too will pass. We don't know when it will pass, but there will be a point where it feels more normal than what it does today. We communicated on a monthly basis to all employees, and we did fun things and videos, and we did a lot of engagement things. The HR team really rallied, both around just benefits. How do you fix some of the mechanical things that need to be fixed right now? And some of that was helped by government intervention, and some of that was not helped by government intervention. And we said, okay, here's the standard. We don't want anybody to feel that their compensation is going to be impacted because they need to quarantine or they need to be at home. And so this is the standard around the company. Figure out how you apply that. So there was a lot of agility, I would say, in the HR function, which was really great to see. Agility that you want to turn on in a non-crisis situation, right? How can you quickly adapt and not have to worry about, I need the 27-page policy before I can go ahead and do that. You didn't have time for the 27-page policy. No one was going to read a 27-page policy. It was, this is what makes sense, and how do you just get that word out, communicate that. How do you know that may have a ripple effect elsewhere? So if that's the best standard that we're going to set, then we want to set that standard everywhere around the world, and let our employees know that we care about them in the company, no matter where they are, and that it would have a consistent feel, even though these employees around the world may not ever speak to one another, it would have a consistent feel. I would say that the agility of the HR team as well to turn on virtual learning almost immediately. And then to coalesce people around, here is the virtual learning session of the week. Dial in. So they had bifurcated the audience and said, okay, directors, there's a session every Wednesday for you. If you want to dial in, you can. Here's the pre-read. Here's the YouTube video or the TED Talk to watch, and we'll just talk about that. So really creative ways to get people in community. What we were really worried about from the office standpoint was losing the sense of community and people not feeling connected to the bigger organization. And we could accelerate a couple of projects as well along the way because we were, our focus had shifted fairly quickly. So some of the engagement things that were really fun, it was we had the executive team all send in a baby picture, and then we did a competition.
A baby picture.
Guess who these people are, and so things like that. Or we did, one of our team in India led some mindfulness sessions that we then broadcast to everybody, and so a ton of people just rallied around how do I create some space for non-work related things. A lot of just coffee sessions, and let's just see each other on the other side of nothing unique. I think many companies did that. I loved how vicariously some of that came about, or how spontaneously some of that was created. It's now looking at the opportunities of which of those things should live.
Why didn't we do things like that before, right?
Exactly.
Time, effort, or resources to make it happen. And to be honest, the amount of people that probably were exposed to each other through that would never have come face to face or communicated before, right?
I think it's. We were talking about that with the executive team just this week. So we did kind of a lessons learnt this week, and what do we feel good about? What do we want to continue? What do we think we could have done differently so that we can build that into pandemic plans of the future or crisis planning for the future? And because, you never want to waste a good crisis, and we're still somewhat in the middle of it. But one of the massive advantages was it just made the world borderless overnight, and we had announced in September last year a new operating model going from a very decentralized regional model to a global model. And I think this completely accelerated our transition to that, because all of a sudden, everybody I never would speak to Chris before, but now it's pretty quick. I can just, and I always had access to Microsoft Teams. I never used it. At the beginning, we were using Skype for business, and then we moved on to Microsoft Teams amidst the pandemic. It was again waiting for us. We just hadn't deployed it, and we felt that it would be better technology. It was always available, but I never did that. I would only ever see Chris when I would travel to the UK, and now all of a sudden it's, hey, have you got a minute? I've just got a quick question, and all of a sudden the walls have come down. We heard from some of our minority groups. Which again, we've interacted with a lot, and there's been a lot of that going on in the United States, which is really, really sad, but has given an opportunity for us to have deeper conversations with our employees, to really look at some of the systemic barriers that may exist that we don't even know, and look at some of our processes and practices at a deeper level. But some of our minority employees were saying that their sense of belonging in the organization has increased during this, because previously, it may have been, if I was in the coffee area with the right people, I would get information shared with me. And it was not that people were trying to keep information necessarily, but there's a vicarious way that things get done in organizations as well. And now everything's getting emailed, everything's on Microsoft Teams, everything, so we very quickly moved to different ways to share information because we needed to. And people that wouldn't have access to that information before are now having access. It's making their job easier. They're feeling like much more in the know about what's going on.
Part of something bigger. Mm-hmm.
Which is cool. So it's like, all right, how do you not stop that? Because the natural reaction is you get back into your little pod in the office that you were in, and that's the group that you interact with the most. And so how do you keep some of those things alive? I think that's our opportunity now to think about and to put in place. And as much as I would love to have it more spontaneous, the way that some of this unfolded, I think we are going to have to put a little bit of structure behind it so that it doesn't go away.
Otherwise, you do need that. You can still make it spontaneous, but like whilst having a structure there, so it doesn't not happen at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
What were some of the other things that during that meeting you mentioned that the other leaders pointed out was some of the things that they wanted to keep?
We talked about the desire to keep this degree of trust that has allowed us to work remotely so well. And so how do you keep some of the flexible working opportunities alive as we go forward? And we'll need a little bit of structure around that, I think. I think the protocols that we put in place, we'll see many of them stay. So some of the protocols that we put in place, particularly for our factories, we think are really good protocols in general. So obviously some of them are very unique to this particular pandemic, like keeping contact tracing, who have I come into contact with.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the things that we've put in place around that, we're like, well, some of these should really continue. It would be good to know who a maintenance person interacted with, just in case. What if that person
you can automate it, right? And it doesn't
add exactly
complexity, then why not?
Yeah, so some of the protocols we would like to see continue. I think, again, this agility that came a lot in the communications front. So we did break down a lot of the borders of this decentralized organization with common communications. So how do you continue? We don't want different regions communicating different messages. And that's been, I think there's been a real awareness or acknowledgement of that as we go through this crisis, that, the longer this goes on, I think the more natural that will be to stick. But that's one of the lessons that we talked about that we wanted to keep. And we talked about some of the lessons just around, in general, the creation of community. So how do you, I didn't stop before and have a coffee hour with my team every week. And now I have a coffee hour with my team every week, which started as a check-in because now it's like, everyone's remote all of a sudden. The things you learn about
people. Work though, right? How crazy is that? Like, even when we never did, let's actually just spend an hour as just a team and just have a coffee break or go for a walk or whatever it may be, right? But
exactly,
just being virtual to realize that's that important.
Just to have a chat, just to be like, hey, what's going on in your world? And that, and how much you learn about people. And of course, you're seeing a lot of their natural surroundings. And the challenges people are having with childcare. I had a meeting yesterday with one of my team. The kids are not back at school. They're not going to go back to school for another 8 weeks or so. And they had hired help. Her and her husband both work, and they'd hired help, and the help didn't turn up. And so it was. These working parents really have a difficult time right now.
Trust me, I get it. My wife and I we have one kid, and we were struggling.
Oh my goodness!
My wife was at breaking point because she was trying to manage her job, my job, and we were both at breaking point.
It's tough. It's super tough. And so I think that some of this empathy that comes with not everybody's situation is the same. And I think a lot of families, a lot of, the men in our organization are seeing for the first time what their wives do on a daily basis to manage the household and vice versa, right? Whoever the primary working parent is. And of course, when you have two working parents, I think there's just a higher degree of empathy that the work week doesn't have to look like 9 to 5. It doesn't work in that structured a way for everybody.
Life works.
And life doesn't work in that structured a way for everybody. And there's been a really nice adaptation to that, I would say now, that again is one of the learnings, one of the things of how can you continue that. Some of our processes had to change overnight. We didn't do a lot of electronic signatures, for example, crazy things. And then you would realize, well, unless the international trade team comes in to sign this stuff and notarize this stuff and get this out, then we can't get this product out. So they put in place some really great updated business processes out of necessity. Those things will stay. Some of us, my function is one of the big ones that needs to stop and say, okay, we put in place all of these Band-Aids around sick leave, around caregiving, around, just some of the mechanics of we didn't put any Band-Aids in around working from home. It just happened. But which policies do we need to revisit that need to live going forward? Should we change our sick leave policy in general or our time off policy in general? And I think we're at a point now where we're not managing as much. It doesn't feel as much in crisis mode as it once did. So you're now looking at how do you thrive out of this? Okay, are we being intentional about looking at some of that stuff and saying these things should deliberately change? We changed our donation policy, for example, because this created quite a necessity. So we changed how and who could decide. We love the local empowerment was another lesson of what worked really well was don't color outside the lines on these things. The rest is yours to do.
It's so important. Especially when you're talking about being as such a large organization, you have to be able to
absolutely
make decisions and move quickly. You can't afford to go for a long decision-making process especially during current events.
And you, I think your natural instinct is, is to control, to help, to manage. I want to know what's going on. And So finding this balance, which we've found of, okay, these are the things that should bubble up that we want to be communicated, and just run. Here are the things we want you to tell us about, and donations was one of them, where we really wanted to be able to log the donations that we were making, both in product, in kind, and in cash, which we empowered the local teams to make those decisions. If we kind of established a global budget. Here's how much we think we're good to spend. You guys go and figure out who needs it. We want to serve the communities that we're in. We really care about the people that work in and around us, not just us. We obviously are focused on health, and we're focused on food. They're the two big things. And what was really good about that was being able to get some mileage for the rest of our employees, to be able to give headline numbers like Bunge donated $2 million to food-related causes or to health-related causes. Was a really good headline for pride for the organization, that we would have probably not gotten if we hadn't put some of those principles in place. So you can do it, spend it, we want you to, but we do want to know what that is. So we'll keep that going. So there were some really interesting small things, some small, some big things. But I think that, again, looking at, if I had have asked pre-pandemic to set up a communications website within a day that could be the house and the portal for everybody to go and get their communication core messages from, I would have been told that it was a 3-week exercise, and
about to say.
We probably needed an RFP, and and the fact that we were able to do that is, okay, how do you continue that, right? Like that happened. So when there is necessity, we're able to get things done, and that's been really cool. That's been really, really interesting and cool to see just how quickly people in the organization have adapted, and just how ready we were for some of this. I think the core of our culture was very much trust already. But now you're trusting people across borders. I was always in a global role, but many people that were forced into these global roles from our operating model change in September, to trust people that they didn't know. And some of our employee engagement, vicarious employee engagement things that stemmed, really helped build knowledge of these people. So we had Bring Your Child to Work Day. So, we're going to do an hour session. Bring all of the people that are in your peripheral vision there to join the meeting, or what socks you like, what's on your feet day, and just things like that, where you're like, I'm walking around with no shoes on, or no socks on, and someone else wearing funny socks, and someone else wearing house slippers, and so you just, I don't know, just fun little things, ways to bring levity, not take ourselves so seriously. And this is and I think, again, we've kind of been taught some life lessons along the way with this thing as well.
I'm seeing more and more over the last few years that HR is taking up the banner of communications officer. First of all, how did you end up becoming chief comms officer as well? And do you think it's important that that's under the HR banner?
Yeah, I think there's a massive link on the employee communications side. And that was how it kind of came about with Bunge, was, we weren't doing much on the employee or internal communication side. We were about to launch into our 200th birthday celebrations. And so this is too big an opportunity not to use around our value proposition, what it means to be part of this company. We can ignite, food is what we do. So, we want to do global food festivals and have people learn about different countries that we operate in through, using food as the intermediary.
What's great about your company is food is something
food is awesome, right?
Yeah,
right? Break bread. Yeah, exactly. And so, sharing, we wanted countries to share recipes with one another. And in the, did you know we have, 1,000 employees in Mexico, and this is what we make in Mexico, and this is the, one of the staple foods of the Mexican diet, and they were partnered with Ukraine, and learning all about all sorts of other stuff, and so that was super fun. So that kind of the lead up to the bicentennial, and I'd put together kind of an employee engagement program really around the bicentennial that had a massive communications component, because the external constituents were also people that we wanted to, this was a way to build our brand or to reinforce our brand and showcase that more externally. That was the point that I took over communications. It was like, well, why don't you take that? Now, there's a big part of communications that is our financial audience, for example. That is an expertise set that we also engage a third-party vendor to help us with our earnings releases and things like that. It's such a great nexus for HR and communications to be together, because both of these functions have really a bird's eye view of the organization.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this organizational transformation, for example. What are we showcasing that shows we're one Bunge, and having then the team that drives communications as well, being able to drive those things together. We don't want people to see this is what we're doing in Bunge Turkey only in Turkey. We don't want to even use the words Bunge Turkey. We're doing this in Bunge, and it happens to be in Turkey. And so how do you change the rhetoric so that people can start to see that they are part of this big one company? I would say between HR and communications, you've got two pretty big driving forces around some of that culture engagement. To me, it feels like a very natural fit.
What advice would you give to other CHROs that have perhaps taken on that role, responsibility?
Yeah, I'd say if you don't have the formal responsibility, don't ignore the internal communication side. So your comms, your head of communications should be a pretty key partner that you engage with on a regular basis. I think a lot of what you do on the HR side as well very much translates again to the internal communications side. Predominantly, there's an operational component. What tools are you using? Do people have access to them? Are you reaching the mass audience that you want to reach? So what are the medium that you use? That has an operational component to it. We rebuilt an internal portal or an intranet site that was a global site. We updated our branding messages on the external side, et cetera. But a lot, again, of what we think about with the employee value proposition really translates across to the communication side. And then there's, I think what has been the other helpful thing is, as many CHROs would attest, what we do in HR, I think we do amazing things. I think our ability to share them and talk about them to the organization is very lacking.
That's why I started the show.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you market these great tools to the organization? How do you, so I use our communications team a lot, like an internal marketing team for the HR programs that we have, that, engagement is driven because I feel like, I'm working with good people. Okay, do they know who these people are? And again, we've done some creative things through the pandemic, but we had a big leadership shift last year. So how do you humanize these people? People are going to look up and say, who is this guy that's driving the show now? And comms plays a big role in that, right? What stories are we telling about him? What are we asking him to share with the organization? How do you do the 33 questions? Or what book are you reading now, Greg? And let people see him as a human being, our new CEO as a human being, because he came in from outside the organization. So you've got this, there's so many areas where the two things overlap, right? As we think about, again, our HR programs, are we doing enough to tell people that they're out there? I work for good people. The company I work for has an important purpose that I can rally around. Food is one that is easy for people to rally around, and feeding the world. So I like what the company does. I like who I do it for, and I feel that there's opportunity. And so this transparency that you can give to employees around opportunities, whether they're career opportunities, learning opportunities, et cetera, comms is as a big partner to that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, again, it's very symbiotic. In my former company, they were not one and the same, and it still worked well because you just engaged them and saw them as a real partner.
It needs to be one voice though, right? I think it's so important. It needs to be one consistent voice. And if you have two separate functions, no matter how good you are, there's going to be it's not going to be fully aligned from what I've seen anyway.
No, I think that's right. Before I had the communications team reporting up through me, I would engage the comms leader as I would engage the CFO. I mean, I would have very regular conversations, but in terms of how much more traction I have now, I have a lot more traction in terms of no, let's market all of these HR programs. Let's put a plan together, and that's been really powerful for the organization.
What's next then? For you, obviously you're in New York now. You think you're going to stay there because obviously it's pretty. You don't actually need to be in New York, really.
I know. It really does beg a lot of questions. I have a sister in London who's saying, I'm out of London as soon as I can get on the next flight to Australia. And
you need to be there.
And so it is opening up, and that becomes really interesting from a human dimension, from a workforce dimension standpoint, of people choosing where they want to be and how much flexibility the company will provide around that. I choose to go and live in Montana, and is that going to be okay? And but you see people leaving the city in, I think just in it's great. I don't know if it's in London as well.
Like in New York. So I saw something the other day where the rent to live in New York is halved.
That's crazy.
Because people they're desperate. They've got just so many people have left that there's no one's coming in to move into the city.
No, it's a supply demand. Yeah, which is when you're a homeowner like me or an apartment owner like me, that you're not really benefiting from that side of the equation. And property values have just plummeted. which is, I mean, you see a lot of people leaving, and you can understand why. I mean, New York is an awesome, awesome place when you can access it. Again, very similar to London, right? When you can't, you're just living in a small space with every human that you love, but there's a lot of face time with the humans
right,
that
living
you love.
in New York, because you get to go out and spend time outside of your small apartment.
Exactly.
Whereas when now you don't have that, it's, well, why am I here?
Exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. So we'll stay in New York for at least the foreseeable future. I don't want to rush to leave. I know the city will come back, but it's and it is an awesome city. But and it's only my husband and I, so we don't have so many dynamics of you see people with young families, and it's really tough to be so cooped up, even though you can go outside. It's you're not spending a whole lot of time outside, and there's not much to do when you get out there anyway. But no plans to change on the horizon yet. Although I will say that some of the best things we've done is up and rent an Airbnb for 3 weeks in one of the suburbs and work from there. So changed our working location a couple of times through this, where we've just needed a break, more fresh air and space, and that's been really great. So I think that will continue.
But I'm sure as a team, though, without going into too much detail, it's giving you a new, from a global talent marketplace perspective, it's kind of game on now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think you have to be ahead of it in saying, okay, what is our philosophy here? And having access now to talent sitting on the West Coast or sitting in some country that we don't even do business in today, it opens up a whole lot of new possibilities. I think it's still we still value very much an office culture as an organization. And I think that comes from our industrial roots, where you've got, half of your organization that's in a physical facility every day. There's something that translates then to the office environment. And so you're striking that balance of, it's okay to have that office culture and be proud of that office culture, but what does that look like? So I think what we're seeing now is, we've onboarded some pretty senior people into pretty interesting roles through this, and said, we're not going to stop the hiring process. Yes, it's going to be weird, but the people that we've had join us have said, their experience on joining has been a wonderful one. Again, they've met more people probably in the last 3 months than I had met in my first 2 years with the company.
That's the great thing, yeah.
Yeah. So, now, is it always better to physically break bread and be with someone? Yes. But it doesn't make up for that. But in terms of being able to get the job done and being able to really create value with your partners and collaborate inside the organization, we haven't seen that stop. So I think, again, companies now are grappling with, well, the talent marketplace is a whole lot bigger. Again, if you're not associated with a physical facility, of your production facility, the world has just become pretty open. And so I think the companies that will emerge and thrive out of this are the ones that are really being deliberate about thinking about that as a talent strategy and as an advantage to them, or deliberately saying, we don't want that. And that's okay too. But I think the intentionality is really one of the key things. And again, one of the major lessons we learned is the need to have clarity and intentionality. We want to do this. It may be not the best decision we could have made, but with the information we have today, this is the decision that we're going to make. And wavering one way or another is the enemy. And so what we really need to do is just be really intentional. And I think, again, we see that in culture now. We see that in talent strategies. Let's be intentional. Do we want to be attracting people from different borders or not? Let's be intentional. And this seat obviously plays a big role in elevating those conversations and driving those conversations around intentionality. And that's where I think we are. I mean, I think there's some things that are kind of no-brainers. Yeah, they'll continue. We want them to continue. And there are other things that I think you just have to, again, just be more deliberate about them.
Well, Deborah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us again. It's always a pleasure to see you.
It's been great. I'll see you in 3 years, maybe.
Every 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Just to keep a steady string. I will be talking to you about my podcast. So thanks for that great idea.
Debcast.
Great to see you again. The Debcast. Indeed. Great to see you again. All right. Take care, Chris.
See ya. Bye.
All right. Bye.